of July. Mike Conley reports, according to Athletic, that the Jazz want him back. Why that report now, and what does it mean? What can we learn from the Suns and the Bucks and their defensive evolution? Referee notes, Bojan Bogdanovic notes, NBA Finals preview notes, and a live show, all coming up on today's edition of Locked on Jazz. Pow! How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan. This episode is brought to you by Spotify Green Room. Download the Spotify Green Room app and find our Locked on Rooms. The draft is actually getting fairly close. We'll start digging into some of that. NBA Finals is here. If you have not heard, Locked on Jazz is now available on YouTube. Right now, it's on the Locked on Live channel. That'll convert over to Locked on Jazz. And we're doing live shows now for almost all of our shows. Maybe a few exceptions along the way, but we're doing live shows. And they'll all be available on YouTube Live right now. I'm putting them up on Facebook, Twitch, and Twitter. But they will eventually just be live on YouTube. So please kind of grab that, go over, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Glad to have you aboard today. All right. There was a report in The Athletic by Tony Jones about the Jazz, wanting to do everything for Mike Conley to get Mike Conley back. There's really one sentence in the story that's important, and it goes as follows. Sources tell The Athletic the Jazz want Conley back and will make every attempt to keep him. Otherwise, there wasn't a great deal in that story that was new or newsworthy. Tony doing his job, but I'm just like, from a standpoint of if there was something news or newsworthy in that story, I would say the answer is probably not. And so what's about that story? So there's one of two reasons that story came out. And I always kind of try to figure out, like, what happened here, right? Like, on the Maria Taylor, Rachel Nichols disaster this weekend, like, what happened there? Like, if you go dig into it, you can figure out where that story came from, why it came out now, all those kind of things. So I had two thoughts on this. One, Tony's just doing his job, right? Okay, so that's the first job. Tony's just doing his job. Tony's putting out what he thinks, what is important news story. Second thing is, I did think it was a little strange how non-committal everybody was at the press conference exit. So from Mike's standpoint, I can get it. Mike just but he was very non-committal. And I thought Dennis was pretty non-committal. And my one thought on this, totally just hypothetical, guessing a little bit, is that maybe what we're having here is, with Dennis now in an advisor role, that the Jazz kind of sources, right? So somebody told Tony this. Tony's doing his job. The Jazz wanted out to Mike, hey, I know that the closing press conference felt kind of non-committal. We really want you back. Quinn was, outwardly praising toward Mike and kind of, I can't think of the word. I want to say outlandish, but outlandish implies incorrect. About what an amazing teammate he is, what an amazing person he is, and how he's one of the most favorite people he's ever coached and ever been around. That's universal across the league. In fact, I got asked the other day, like, who's the nicest guy in the league? And I thought, it might be Mike Conley. And so I thought, just trying to take away, like, what is my takeaway from Tony's story? One is the Jazz want Mike Conley, but I don't think that was greatly in doubt. Obviously, there's a price. Obviously, if we can't make any other moves and Mike Conley sign and trade is going to yield something that makes the team better, you have to consider it if that works. But Mike Conley sign and trade means Mike Conley has to agree to where you're going, and Mike Conley has to agree to the sign and trade. And so that's not as easy as it is to pull off. And Mike Conley has to be going to a team that actually matches. So a little bit of my take on this was that this was a little bit of a kind of a, hey, let us send out a balloon message to Mike Conley that we adore you, we think you're terrific, and we want you back. And that's my take on this, is that the reason that story came out, that Tony's doing his job, but there's always a little bit of a reason why a story gets out, is that the Jazz wanted a message out to Mike saying, hey, I know things were kind of non-committal from Dennis and that press conference, and you were non-committal also, but we just want to make sure it's clear. Quinn was out, was outwardly filled with praise. So I just thought that was interesting. That would be my takeaway from that note. There's some interesting stuff going on defensively right now in the playoffs. First off, the two teams that have played the best defense of the playoffs are the teams that are left. Okay, so that's, that could be, you can take that however you want, but Milwaukee really has been outstanding defensively with a 107.1 defensive rating, and Phoenix has had a 107.9 defensive rating. They've both have been terrific defensive teams. What's interesting about that is I think how they've had to evolve throughout the playoffs. And I'm not certain on this, and I was trying to find the data to back this up. But I think that this is, I think I feel pretty comfortable about this. So if you look at the regular season, what's interesting about Phoenix, Utah, and Milwaukee is they all played generally, I would say, drop big. Now, pick and roll. It's a little hard to tell like what percentages they all played it and everything like that, and who played the most of it and this and that and different styles. But if you there's using the data from Second Spectrum, Milwaukee, Utah, and Phoenix all seem to be like top. So Utah and Milwaukee were top 10 drop big defensive teams, like the amount of time they played it. And Phoenix was not, but it felt like during the season they played a lot. The Jazz numbers are a little funky because the Jazz were just so much better than everyone else in pick and roll defense this year, particularly if they played what Second Spectrum defines as soft, which is dropping the big back. The Jazz were by far the best defensive team. So in turn, teams generally try to avoid doing that. Milwaukee has played the same kind of style all year of trying to go ahead and cover the rim and force you off the rim. If you take both drop and ice, which means if it's on the wing, you're forcing the wing, you're keeping him down there, then you get like the Jazz are 6th in the league in doing that the most amount of times per game. Milwaukee is 11th in the league in doing that, and Phoenix comes in about 19th, and then the best defense, the Jazz again are far and away the best defense in the league at that style of defense. The reason I bring this up is there's a feeling a little bit that once you start play better and better teams in the playoffs, you can't play drop big anymore. So what is drop big? Drop big is you're playing pick and roll. They bring the ball handler off. You drop your big back, and as the big man rolls to the basket, the big man, Rudy Gobert behind me, the big man rolls the basket. Your big stays even with the roll man and between the ball handler and the basket. Your defensive player is playing behind the dribbler, forcing him off the three-point line and then trying to get back in front of him. And as the playoffs continue and as teams get better, and some of the ability to hit mid-range jumpers or Trae Young's floater against Milwaukee or Chris Paul and Devin Booker's mid-range game, they take the 4th most amount of mid-range. There's a feeling that you can't play this style anymore because just keeping someone off the rim isn't enough. And so as you drop the big back, Devin Booker, Chris Paul, Trae Young, or Drew Holiday, maybe who's not a great shooter, can beat you. And so you have to evolve out of this defense. So in the regular season, just to kind of give you and I'll dig into it. The Jazz, and this isn't like perfect, but the Jazz during the regular season generally defended about 70, according to Second Spectrum, 70 pick and rolls a game. And they defended 46 of those 70 as either soft or ice. Both those have the big dropping. Ice is pushing it to the sideline with the big dropping, and soft is high pick and roll with the big dropping, the big rolling with you, okay? So the Jazz played 46 of 70. That's, 60% or so. That's a pretty high number. The Milwaukee Bucks, who really like to protect the rim, last year protected 74 pick and rolls. They ended up playing about 44 of their 74. So not quite as many as the Jazz, but still a lot in the regular season. And Phoenix, who played, as we said, a little fewer, they were willing to switch a little bit more, particularly when they played Dario Saric the small. They only played 70 pick and rolls a game, and they played 40 of those 70. So all of them are in the same range. They're all well over 50%. They're all the same style, and they've all had to evolve a little bit in the playoffs. And so I want to dig in the next segment what that is, what that evolution is, what it means for roster building, and what it means. So little detailed, kind of geeky stuff, but that's what the offseason is for. That's why you join the program. Thanks for tuning in. We do try to bring it to you every single day. We had a holiday yesterday, so make sure you're listening 2-3 times a week. Get the latest on everything going on with the Jazz. We'll do our we'll do our numbers here shortly this week on the draft. I'll probably do like the top 10 players, and then I'll do the 11 through 20 players, and then 21 through 30, and probably 31 through 40 for us. Over the next few days of draft numbers. That's actually always been kind of an interesting way to do things on the show. Emmanuel Quickly came out really well last year. Tyler Hero came out really well 2 years ago. So doing some of those draft numbers has actually yielded some kind of finds a little bit. Not all the time, but did have some finds, and I have those collected over the years. So we'll go back and look at who's successful and who's not. We'll start doing that. I mean, the draft is a little less than a month away, or probably actually draft is 20 some odd days away. So we'll do that for you as well. All right. And I'll get to your questions every day as well in the third segment. That's our new live format. Glad to have you. Good audience listening live. Thanks very much for tuning in today. Tuesday edition of the show is brought to you by our friends at Murdoch Hyundai, located at 4646 South State Street in Murray, located in Linden and in Logan. We want to get you into the best car you can possibly get into. The Murdoch Hyundai family has been in Utah for 90 years. Helping out all of Utah, and the Hyundai brand is just amazing. I turned in my Elantra. It was the North American Car of the Year for a reason. It was absolutely fabulous. The one I was driving was $26,000, high end actually for that car, and had every bell, every whistle, just remarkable. And it's why it won North American Car of the Year. Right now, I am driving the Sonata, which is a little bit of the higher end sedan. It's a big car, fits a lot of people, has great space. And then the SUV lineup is amazing. The Tucson, the Santa Fe, the little Kona. I drove the electric for 2 days just to check it out for my dad. Was super impressed by it. They've got a really cool Ioniq 5 coming out at the end of the year. You can check that out. So it's all going on at Murdoch Hyundai. If you're going to head down there, please email me first at dlock09@gmail.com, dlock09@gmail.com. Today's show is also brought to you by Built Bar. Guess what? I think today's the day. I think there's a special flavor. Oh, I don't see it. I thought there was a special flavor coming out today. I think there is. Grasshopper cookie, I think, is coming out today. Limited time flavor. Built Bar's version of the Thin Mint cookie. I have them. They sent them to me. I love them. 150 calories, 17 grams of protein, only 5 grams of sugar. It's amazing. The coconut, I actually will be ordering the grasshopper cookie when it's up, unless I hope it hasn't sold out already. It couldn't have possibly sold out by this morning. These are great. Their specialty flavors are just amazing. The coconut brownie crunch chunk was through the roof. Luckily, still have some of those that were running out. It's all at Built Bar. Promo code Locked On gets you 15% off. The grasshopper cookie is described perfectly. It's the Thin Mint cookie. Order today. Get your grasshopper cookie. The 9 other flavors are there. Built Bar is the official protein bar of the U.S. track and field team as well. Go to built.com. Use the promo code Locked On. Get 15% off your order. Use promo code Locked On at built.com for your latest orders. The grasshopper cookie is not up yet at built.com, but will be shortly. So keep an eye on that, or at least as I record it live. All right. So what are the answers to this defensively? Because what's interesting on this is as you suddenly start to look at various games and things of that nature, is Milwaukee, who we just talked about, has had to change a dramatic amount against Atlanta. That Trae Young got injured, and so we don't actually know if it really was going to work. But by the end, Milwaukee's playing Lopez up a lot higher. There's 2 things so from a Jazz standpoint, what this is that if we continue to play in the playoffs and people are going to play us in pick and roll. Now, what we saw is we're so good in pick and roll that the LA Clippers just stopped playing pick and roll against us. They literally just stopped it and spread the floor and drove, and we saw it. And then Rudy had to come in and help. And then they kicked to Terrence Mann and he made 8 million freaking threes. So let's go just pick and roll. Frankly, we don't need to change our regular season pick and roll. Like, honestly, we don't. Like, we can talk about all this stuff. This is only based on players. We have one of the best defenses in the NBA. We were by far the league's best pick and roll defensive team in the league. We don't need to just start fiddling for the sake of fiddling. There's no reason at all to change this from what we saw in the regular season. There is some argument that as the playoffs continue, you have to evolve. And I actually think we made all of these adjustments. I actually don't think this is like something that's that different and that new. But there's some aspects to this when we build this roster that we can look at. So first off, I do think the Jazz have done this. Rudy's played up higher much more. Rudy's been willing to switch much more. Rudy's been much more active defensively. The Jazz have adjusted throughout this game where the level of the screen, where he plays based on the level of the screen. All of these things have actually taken place, and it's why we're the number one defense in the NBA this year and why we're the number one pick and roll defense. So when it gets to pick and roll, and this is where it's just crushing that we didn't get to play Phoenix. And give Clippers credit. They beat us. Like, they absolutely exploited our weakness and we didn't have an answer to it. And that is still, frankly, going to be a problem. But here are the two things in the league that happen, I think, if in fact you're playing, you got to play this style. And so here it gets really interesting. So one is you can just switch everything, right? I think that we're going to probably switch more and more, and then Rudy gets pulled out of the middle. And as you're forced to switch more and more, and Rudy does a pretty good job with this, the problem is what we're going to now start seeing is instead of people doing the silly thing where they attack Rudy every time and they pull him out and they attack him and then Rudy blocks a shot and we all go crazy and I make a joke about it on the air like, oh, everybody tries it once. And what they're actually going to start doing is they're going to drive and they're going to kick. And they're going to kick and they're going to penetrate off the kick. And then Rudy's got to rotate back and it's a question of whether he can get there in time. So what this brings up is something we've talked about a lot. The secondary rim defender is wildly important in this league. This is going to be the new, and I've talked about this for probably 2 years now. And this is where Draymond Green and Kevin Durant were so great together because they were two rim defenders. You're going to have a secondary rim defender on the floor as teams spread out and five guys can shoot so that when the penetration, the rotation comes, if they've pulled your main guy out, you can bring another rim defender. It's where the Bucks are so great. They have Giannis Antetokounmpo, if he's healthy, and Brook Lopez both being able to defend as the rim defender on those plays. And that makes a world of difference. Jay Crowder's not quite that rim defender. Mikal Bridges actually is pretty darn close. He's that good of an athletic wing. So sometimes when we're talking about these athletic wings and we're talking about these more athletic positions, Bogdanovic and Royce just are not that. That would be a little bit of an adjustment for us. Can we find another rim defender who can be active and long and play with Rudy in the sense that if Rudy's get pushed out to the outside? The second thing that gets interesting here is if you're playing pick and roll and Rudy's got to come up higher to the ball, the roll man now tries to roll behind Rudy. You have to probably bring the corner guy in from the weak side corner to bang and bump the roll man. It's what they do to Rudy all the time. The problem is you got to be big enough to do that. This is where, as much as everyone says this game is going small, everything I'm talking about here gets to be size and length. Size and length still matters pretty dramatically in this league. And the Bucks are, like, if you think about the Bucks with Giannis at 7'1" and Lopez at 7'1" and Middleton's decently length and Drew Holiday's big for his position, like they get PJ Tucker's not, he's just physical. They get long, right? They got two, because of Giannis, everything fits in. Mikal Bridges is long for his position. Jay Crowder's not. DeAndre Ayton's 7'1", so he is. Devin Booker and Chris Paul are probably fine. So, I think that when you're talking about these guys, length matters because now, so Rudy's got to come up to deal with Trae Young or Chris Paul or Devin Booker or Kawhi Leonard or Paul George or any of these mid-range marvels in the postseason, and he comes up to bother. You still want your guard or your wing to get in back on him in a way so that Rudy can release back to the roll man and still protect the rim. You don't want him out. That's just switching. So your preferred approach is to come out, bother him, and let your guy get back. But if that role comes aggressively, someone's got to come from the weak side to defend, and then your other defender has to play the X on the X out defensively. If they run something and that's Mike Conley or Donovan Mitchell, you're 6'1", not having an impact on a guy who's a foot taller than you. So that's another issue here. When you talk about the Jazz have to make some evolution defensively, that's where length, versatility, we're thinking about on ball all the time. But I would actually argue we're talking about secondary rim defenders. We're talking about guys who can roll and bump a big. When Rudy rolled against the Clippers, he ran into massive men, right? Because they were all 6'8", 220. Every guy on the floor other than Reggie Jackson was 6'8", 220. So when Rudy rolled and they brought a weak side guy in and blasted him, it was 6'8", 220 that was hitting him. So those are the kind of little like roster adjustments, defensive versatility we're seeing, because I do think you're going to have to drop the big. Unquestionably works. Like best teams in the league do it. They do it all year. It works for the regular season. We're great in the pick and roll. There's no need to greatly adjust that, but you're going to have the versatility to do more things defensively, whether that's playing 1 through 5 switching, whether that's playing your big up a little bit higher, whether that's blitzing at times, which you really don't want to do with Rudy because it pulls him too far out. Those kind of things you're going to want to be able to do. But the key to all of them are secondary rim defenders, long wings that can take space in passing lanes, Xing out on the far outside. Like one of the things that killed us against the Clippers was when they brought the guy in on Rudy, Nicholas Batum standing out there at 6'8", 220 with his 7-foot wingspan with his arms all wide out doing all that crazy stuff. And it was hard for us to make the passes to each side. So, I think that's what a little bit of what we're talking about there with those versatilities. So just want to share that with you. A few other notes for you. Bojan Bogdanovic's team lost the other day. He was awesome. I think he had close to 40 again. I honestly am glad. I just think Bojan just battled so hard through that wrist. Any break he can get. I mean, I don't mean to say like, hey, for Bojan playing the national team and winning is amazing. I wish Joe wasn't playing, frankly. I have no problem with anyone who said no to the Olympics this year. This short turnaround flip, I understand it's a once in a lifetime. I understand Rudy representing France. I understand why you would do it. I also have 100% understanding why you would say no right now. So frankly, from a Jazz standpoint, I think if we were perfectly selfish and honest about things, we would probably want to keep all of our players out of the Olympics and let them just rest and get ready for the next season. I'll talk a little bit about the NBA Finals here for a second. The NBA refs are out and who they're going to be. I'll share that with you, and I'll take your questions as we continue on the show today. Today's show is brought to you by our good friends at betonline.ag. That is your home for your sports betting with the promo code Locked On. You get a 50% welcome bonus. Baseball lines all the Dodgers are playing Miami today, -1.5. My Giants lost yesterday despite having our ace on the mound, but we're -1.5 against Wainwright and the Cardinals today. Here are the NBA Finals lines. You also can bet the U19 series, by the way. Phoenix is a 6-point favorite tonight. And so Phoenix is a 6-point favorite. And then you can actually have some fun stuff because it's the finals. If you want to bet the line like up a little bit. So in other words, if you want to bet Phoenix to win by 12.5, you bet 100 to win 190. If you want to bet Phoenix to win by over 15, you're betting 100 to win 200. They have some fun kind of lines like that to make it more interesting on that. They have NBA game props out for you as well. The series right now is the Suns -190 and the Bucks +165. So they're definitely expecting that. USA under 19s playing Australia under 19. They're in 11. That game is taking place today. And the USA is a 17-point favorite in that one. Also, keep an eye on it all. A lot of fun stuff going on. They also have the Mickelson-Brady matchup against DeChambeau and Rogers. And the DeChambeau and Rogers are the favorites. And that one, that's all at betonline.ag. Today's show is also brought to you by grip6.com. My good friends at Grip6 do amazing work. The belts, the socks, and the wallets. You make your choice. The promo code is Locked On for you to get the best deal available. But let's talk about the belts because that's my favorite. It's all I wear. Without flaps, without holes, without bulk. It fits perfectly. Yesterday, I had to give my 30-inch waist son my 36-inch waist belt because he forgot his belt. And I will admit that one did not fit as perfectly as my strap wrapped around his 18-year-old waist quite a ways. But that's why when you buy Built 6, if you remember your own belt and get Grip 6, you get your own belt. You actually get to like say what your size is. And that's why it fits perfectly. And you don't have to be a nincompoop. And is that a real word? I don't know. And forget your belt and make your dad be the one who wears no belt. But when you have a 30-inch waist, shorts don't fit. So I had to help him out. All right, that's a little bit more about our family life than you needed to know. But what I am telling you is that grip6.com is outstanding. The men's honeycomb belt is my personal favorite. It's right on the front page right there with 102 5-star reviews. You can get it with whatever color belt you want. And then the great honeycomb buckle, they're $49 plus the promo code Locked On will make it cheaper for you. If you dig through, you'll see various things. The really high-end, beautiful ones are the premium series available for you. Have the forged carbon fiber belt for you. You can are a little bit higher, and that's what I wear when I'm wearing a suit. And then you also can just get the basic men's classic pack. It's all at grip6.com. All right. NBA officials are out. Tony Brothers, James Capers, Mark Davis, Zach Zarba, and John Goble. Those are kind of the 5 thought of best veteran officials in the league. Tony Brothers, James Capers, Mark Davis, Zach Zarba, John Goble, with all the injuries and everything else. Those are the kind of 5 veterans. Goble's right on the edge. And then the next generation, the kind of the best officials in the game, these are the guys that get there. James Williams, David Guthrie, Pat Fryer, Sean Wright, Courtney Kirkland's getting his first finals, Eric Lewis, Kane Fitzgerald, Josh Teven. Oh, and Scott Foster obviously is in that first group. So Brothers, Capers, Mark Davis, Scott Foster, Zach Zarba, and John Goble are kind of the 6 lead veteran best officials in the league, in the league's mind. And the next tier, Sean Wright, James Williams, David Guthrie, Pat Fryer, Courtney Kirkland, Eric Lewis, Kane Fitzgerald, Josh Teven, all coming up. That's like the next 7 that are there. Wright, a little bit older. James Williams, I think a little bit older. Fryer, Guthrie, Kane, and Teven on the younger group that's actually making it through. Nate McMillan got a 4-year deal, which is probably worth talking about during the week. With that, tomorrow I owe you the points gained players, just with the Conley news and stuff. I thought we should touch on that. Let me get to some of your questions. David Horan, great to see you, my man. Here comes the question I think we're all feeling. Is it wrong? I still can't find myself able to watch NBA games all the way through because of Jazz depression. It is totally fine. I'm not that far off from you, but I do think it's the finals. The finals have been legendary no matter what the year is and what the story is. And it's probably time for us to stop and grab it and listen and watch and enjoy it. So I think that's it. What do you think the coaches are working on with Rudy? Josiah Johnson with a good question from YouTube. Again, we're going to move everything over to YouTube, so please go subscribe at Locked On Live, and we'll not be on Twitch or Twitter or Facebook here at some point. So we'll just be on YouTube, so please make that jump over there. I really think it's a lot of just a lower body balance strength, and you got to be a little careful here because the things that make Rudy great, the multiple actions defensively, the incredible dexterity, the ability to get out on a pick and roll and then get back to the rim, and all those things are also, you could lose them if you try to add too much lower body strength. His problem is when he rolled against the Clippers and they pushed him, he's so top heavy, he doesn't have that lower body girth that he ends up kind of losing his balance and he couldn't make the roll to the basket. The same thing in his post play, when someone gets in between him and the basket, he doesn't hold his balance particularly well. But you go make him too heavy down below, you could lose all the things that make him great defensively. So it's a little bit of a give and take there. I think you have to be a little careful with. Brandon Whiteside, another year of an often hurt aging point guard. They better figure out who's going to be the next point guard. I think he's going to be hurt more and will be another step slower. I mean, Mike's 30. It's a little dour by Brandon for a guy who had an all-star year and was great, but certainly the injuries and, once he's gotten hurt, he hasn't played more than 6 or 7 games in a row because we're resting him and taking care of him. I think you have to manage a 33-year-old point guard. I think, as time goes on, Donovan probably becomes our primary ball handler in a multiple ball handler system. How involved will Donovan be in personnel decisions this season? So another good question from Josiah. I think this is a really tricky game. So you can ask Donovan his opinion and you can see what he wants to do. But the minute you ask that and you don't do it, now you're into a world of hurt. Like we've seen this with numerous teams where they go to their star and they say, hey, what do you think? Well, now you're almost letting your star become the GM. And I'm not sure that that's always the best answer. So keeping Donovan in the communication loop and keeping Donovan aware of what's taking place and discussing things with him is great. And same with Rudy. But you have to be very careful that the minute you do something that they didn't approve of, or they told you they wanted something else and you do something else, you've now pissed them off to all end. And we've seen this numerous times with teams where they involve their best player, but their best player is not a GM, doesn't know all the cap implications, doesn't have all the background. I doubt very many best players would be great GMs. So you have to balance delicately with this to the idea that you want Donovan engaged, you want his insight, you want him buying in, you want Rudy buying in, you want Rudy engaged, you want their thoughts, but you also have to have a communication with them well enough so they understand why if you go a different direction once you've involved them. Now, not involving them at all is not an answer. They'll feel ostracized, they'll feel disconnected, and you'll end up in trouble. But you've got to be very careful with this idea that you just like go to Donovan and say, what do you want? And then Donovan says, well, I want Jason Tatum. And you're like, well, we can't go get that. And then, he's not unrealistic, but you understand, like, there's also reasons why certain players may or may not fit. And I think that you have to be just a little careful with this. I actually watch more often than not, involving the player in these decisions comes back to backfire on teams. And you've got to find a way to do it in a manner that does not backfire. So we'll see. All right. One last question from Jason Snyder. If teams don't play pick and roll because Rudy's so good at defending it, do the Jazz have the ability to elitely defend other offensive schemes? So we did not against the Clippers, right? So that was spread us 5 wide, dribble drive, just get to the rim, beat us off the dribble. We did not have the ability to handle that. There are not a lot of teams in the league that can go 5 wide and have 5 out and have that many dribble drive guys. The Lakers probably would have done it to us with Anthony Davis and had LeBron powering into the basket, but they also didn't have the shooting. The Clippers were the number 1 3-point shooting team in the league. So they wouldn't have had the shooting. You would have had guys out there taking shots that weren't very good 3-point shooters if Rudy came in. Denver wouldn't have done it because they have Jokic playing the style and they're going to stay in their style. Phoenix doesn't have the one on Mikal Bridges, not a one-on-one. Chris Paul's not actually a one-on-one isolation player anymore. Booker is. So they wouldn't have been able to do it either. I mean, unfortunately, we ran into the team that could do it to us. The Brooklyn Nets would kill us. The Brooklyn Nets would spread us out, drive us to the end of the earth. So there are, 2 or 3 teams that can get us in this style. And ideally you're going to get better, but that's not an easy thing to do, Jason. I mean, the answer on this would be if you're trying to find what are the other offensive schemes. So if you've eliminated pick and roll, you're really getting dribble, drive, and kick and transition are kind of the other answers. There aren't a lot of other things you can be doing. Off-ball screens and some of that action you probably would see against us more than other teams. Teams kind of throw the fewest passes against us because the more they pass, the more our defense gets set. And I think you're going to see teams wanting to stay away from that. So the problem is like if you add one elite defensive player, then they just go away for that one elite defensive player. If they actually have 4 or 5 guys that can dribble, drive, penetrate. But yes, if we can find some longer, more well-spaced defense or players who can eat up spacing and a secondary rim defender somehow without disrupting too much, that's the answer to the question. That's kind of been the theme of the show. So Jason, nice job wrapping it up. Thank you all for tuning in. This is Locked on Jazz. Appreciate you very much for tuning in. Make sure you do it 3-4 times a week. We appreciate our high-end listeners. I think are listening about 2 times a week. So you want to add a 3rd one. That would make me very happy. It is Locked on Jazz right now. Tell your smart device to listen to the most recent episode of podcast Locked on Today. Have a good one.